Hello, everybody. Welcome into the next edition of Carnival by Daylight 2, The Electric Boogaloo. Today, we're going to be talking about what is horror in Dead by Daylight, how do we know what belongs, and what we can do as a community to make sure that we get all the stuff we would make us happy and not go overboard. All right, so let's first start by defining horror. Let's talk about what is horror. And horror, of course, is a genre of literature, film, media. Of course, it's designed to elicit fear, dread, disgust, terror. Usually supernatural, though. Of course, you have psychological, macabre. These are things that kind of just determine what are horror. Now, it doesn't necessarily say the medium of how it is delivered, like through jump scares or such like that. Horror is it's creating a response. It's to disturb. It's going to scare you. It's meant to frighten, and it doesn't always have to be like in the moment frighten. You could have suspense, gore, monsters, psychological tension. Creatures for horror could be a regular person. The monsters don't always have to be otherworldly in creation. Oftentimes, horror is used to reflect social fears, anxieties. It preys upon people's own fears of certain things. Cultural taboos, of course. Big examples like cannibalism. All that kind. Stuff like that is part of the what makes horror. Of course, we could say things, when you look back at like The Exorcist, Halloween, Blair Witch, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Babadook, Get Out. These are all psychological. They're all psychological horror. They're iconic films, but they're not all the same, and that's I think where this comes into. And the reason mainly that I'm addressing this is because there has been a lot of discussion, both in the past and going forward, about what does and does not belong in Dead by Daylight. So we're going to go over and say, in my opinion, as a humble Eldritch horror, what I see as a good way to measure what we believe fits in Dead by Daylight. And again, this is mostly grounded in opinion. I will be giving some points to explain my thought process, so we can get there together. And of course, feel free to comment. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with these points I'm going to bring up? Do you disagree? Do I make sense? Do I don't make sense? Do an and but or kind of thing, like and I see what you're going with, but I don't agree with it kind of situation. Maybe again, feel free to engage. Of course, like, comment, subscribe. It does help let me know if these are sorts of things you guys want to see, or do you guys want me just to cover like topics just in Dead by Daylight, like mechanics, or just put a list of all the horror things I want to see in the game. All right, so let's talk about horror. And so what we got with horror is people say, well, and this debate mainly came to my attention when I saw people talking about Disney wanting Darth Vader in Dead by Daylight. And a lot of people railed that Darth Vader cannot be in Dead by Daylight because Darth Vader is not a horror monster. Darth Vader doesn't fit the mold. He is from an action sci-fi setting, and just he's not horror. He's not scary. So let me explain, in my opinion, what I feel, how you can determine what is a good fit. Let's start with a character. All right, so we found out through things like Blood and Honey and the Steamboat Willie that you can make a horror movie out of any property, out of any idea. I saw that they're going to be doing a Wizard of Oz horror coming up here in the future. Anybody can take anything and make it a horror movie, but that's not what people want. in Dead by Daylight. They don't want someone's horror interpretation of the license. They want the license. They didn't want a interpretation of Tokyo Ghoul. They wanted Tokyo Ghoul. So when it comes to determining whether or not it's horror or it can be determined as something the entity would want to bring in, let's look at a few key features. Number one, could you take the character, change nothing about them, not their personality, not who they are, not the universe they're in, just all the settings, all the character, set them down and make them the antagonist in a horror setting. And as keeping with the example of Star Wars, I think yes. If you look at Darth Vader, if you look at what he's done, if you even on a cursory glance, just doing the movies, not even reading the books or the comics, where Darth Vader is a lot darker an individual, I would say that you could easily make a horror movie from the perspective of rebels or fleeing Jedi that makes Darth Vader a horror monster. He is uncaring. He doesn't stop. He doesn't differentiate ally from enemy when getting goals done. He'll cut through stormtroopers if they're in his way. He's been noted to kill plenty of people on his side for the minorest of infractions. He's a worse villain than some of the people in Dead by Daylight. Certainly worse than, say, like the Spirit. Spirit technically just did nothing wrong. She's very angry, and Darth Vader's an angry boy. So could we make Darth Vader into a horror movie, into a horror antagonist? Yes. Would that be one of the coolest movies that Disney could ever make? Probably. So, could we bring Darth Vader into Dead by Daylight? Yes. The question is would we want Darth Vader in Dead by Daylight? Because horror is subjective. Like, I personally, not a big fan of heights. But I don't need an extension ladder as the next killer. My fear of heights doesn't determine the next killer. It'd be a bit weird to be chased by something that just kind of wobbles after you and threatens to put you in a high place. So we got to determine, do we want it? I mean, look at some of the characters we've brought in, which aren't really horror in the traditional sense, but we can make an argument for them. D&D Vecna. He doesn't go out of his way to be scary, but he does represent the dread of great power. Tokyo Ghoul. You can argue whether that's a horror anime series or not, but certainly if you were just a person on the street and some guy with 4 massive tendrils came whipping out at you like a cannibalistic Spider-Man, yeah, nope. That's a big no. Castlevania Dracula. Well, the character of Dracula literally, in literature, is a horror icon. Castlevania Dracula doesn't go out of his way to be scary, because he just is more powerful than you. He just is going to kill you. He doesn't need to prove that he's scary. He just is. And that's where I think people lose some of this is, the ties to horror in the roots. Darth Vader is anger personified. But, you can look at some other characters, that you would want and say, okay, could they fit the horror genre? Could we bring them in? And I think that's where what we really need to focus is, would it make sense in a horror movie for this character to be themselves? Not some weird person's interpretation of a murderous, like Winnie the Pooh. But could actual Winnie the Pooh be in Dead by Daylight? No, not really. He wouldn't do a whole lot. Could we bring Sportacus from Lazy Town in as a villain? I'm pretty sure we could make him scary, but he doesn't fit. He doesn't make any sense. Robbie Rotten? No, could make a horror movie about Robbie Rotten. As much as we love the actor, it wouldn't make sense to bring him in because he just doesn't fit the mold of horror. So, with that said, horror being so subjective. Some people find things scary. Some people find things like exciting. Like, there's a lot of people liked Five Nights at Freddy, really wanted it in the game. People can make an argument that it isn't really horror. Some people make the argument, well, yeah, it is, because they jump out and go rawr and scare you. So we really need to just kind of focus on what fits the Dead by Daylight mold. What we want to do is we want to be inviting to new licenses, to new ideas, new experiences that we feel could enhance Dead by Daylight, Could we make this? Could we make this character? Would this character be someone we would run from? Could this be someone that would chase us around, make us go, oh god, he's coming right at me. He's got a laser sword. I don't know how I was able to stun him with a pallet, but we were able to stun the Dark Lord with a pallet. We were able to get away from a Velociraptor. We were able to dodge the shark. Things that traditionally aren't always super scary, but we can make them scary. They can fit those roles. You know, an alligator by itself isn't a scary thing, but we can put it in a movie and make it scary, and we're not really changing too much about an alligator's behavior. Sharks, we have had plenty of horror movies and video games and medias about sharks being the antagonist, and we've had to change very little, if anything, about them, especially in more recent times. You know, we have actual historical documents about sharks being an unintentional antagonist at sea. So what we want a future where we're not choking ourselves out of content because it doesn't fit the actual definition of horror to the T. It's kind of something we want to determine, would it be fun? We want a bright future. We want the gate to be open and monitored, not kept. All right, my friends. So until next time, I look forward to talking to you about the next thing. Remember to like, subscribe, share. I appreciate you guys. And until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.